Panthers Nation, what up, dude? It's Aaron Duncan here with the Necessary Bluntness Sports Talk, and today we have a lot of news to cover because you guys already know about the Matt Rhule firing. If you're not, you've probably been living under a rock, but we got to talk about Matt Rhule. We got to talk about David Tepper finally make a statement about the basement people and everything else in between. We got to talk about our GM, Scott Fitter. We got to talk about some injuries that came out of the San Francisco game and the interim head coach, Steve Wilks, and what this means going forward. So stick around right now. We're starting right now. What's going on? Once again, my name is Aaron Duncan here at the Necessary Bluntness Sports Talk. Give a recap analysis of the Panthers. So if you want to see more about this team, the news and updates, the film breakdowns that I do on a weekly basis, hit the subscribe button down below and the bell icon so you get notification every time I drop a video, because I'm bringing these things like hotcakes in. Obviously, with all this change going on around the organization, there's going to be a lot of things to cover. So if you don't want to miss anything and stay on top of it, subscribe, bell icon. The first thing we have to talk about is obviously Matt Rhule being fired. We talked about it in the live stream earlier this morning, but 11-27 as a coach, obviously being fired a quarter ways through his 7-year deal. That was a $62 million that really pissed a lot of other owners off in the league, because giving a guy that was this inexperienced that kind of money sets a precedent that other owners don't really want to live up to, because obviously when you're operating from the coach's salary, it doesn't affect the regular team salary cap. So the numbers can be inflated and a lot of things can play into that fact. But nevertheless, Matt Rhule just seemed to be in over his head from day one. There's a lot of mistakes around his tenure. You can probably criticize him getting rid of Cam Newton. I personally understand it from a business standpoint, but the way they went about it and kind of spurned him to the point that he couldn't find another opportunity in a timely manner because of COVID, it really probably divided 2/3, if not half of the fan base, just because of how much Cam Newton has done for us. But not only did that, he doubled down and traded for Teddy Bridgewater, who was going to be a perfect bridge quarterback on a team-friendly deal, but you got rid of him after year one. You overspent for Sam Darnold. You hired a bunch of inexperienced coaches on your staff. Then you fired one of the inexperienced coaches who was the offensive coordinator just for your offense to take a step back ever since. Carousel of quarterback moves, and now with Matt Rhule being gone, there's a lot of stuff coming forward. Former players are talking about, former people that worked under this regime talked about how much of a micromanager that Matt Rhule is, and it's been a conundrum of things going on. But not only was Matt Rhule fired, but Steve Wilks has been promoted to the interim head coach. But one of his first moves was to fire Phil Snow, the defensive coordinator. Now, a lot of fans were wondering, the defense is the only thing we can hang our hat on. Why are we firing Phil Snow? According to sources, aka Joe Person and a lot of other people, got to give Cody from C3 Panthers Podcast a little bit of credit. He got the insight a little bit earlier that there's some dissension between Phil Snow and Steve Wilks, and there's philosophical differences. Phil Snow likes to use more safeties and DBs on the field. Steve Wilks is not like that. They have two different philosophies. It was a clash at times, and it just didn't work. So obviously, Phil Snow and Matt Rhule being tied at the hip, pretty much every head coaching opportunity Matt Rhule has had, Phil Snow has been his defensive coordinator. Matt Rhule has been on record multiple times saying Phil Snow is the best coach he knows, which is why he trusts him so much. So if you really wanted to move on from Matt Rhule and the things affiliated, you kind of had to get rid of Phil Snow. But they also got rid of Foley, who was a special teams assistant coach. Our special teams coordinator, Chris Tabor, is still on staff, and he's done a phenomenal job, so credit out to him, even though it's a side thing right there. But head coach, defensive coordinator, and now special teams coordinator, assistant coordinator, is gone. A lot of the pieces of the thumbprints of what made Matt Rhule here in Carolina is gone. And it's time to move on. And so that comes up to Steve Wilks. And that brings us to our next topic. Steve Wilks, the former defensive coordinator for the Panthers and former head coach for the Arizona Cardinals for 1 year, will be the interim coach for the remaining 12 games of the season. Now, a lot of people are happy for Steve Wilks because he's from Charlotte. He's been a Panther. He's been around for a while. He's a great man. He does things the right way and seems to do things the right way. Obviously, with the pending lawsuit with the NFL over their hiring practice of minority coaches, it could have seemed a little awkward, but kudos to David Tepper for giving Steve Wilks a chance here. Some people are sour that, one, he's only going to get 12 games. Two, interim coaches rarely get a fair shake because with all these injuries to the quarterback position, the defense has some injuries as well. It doesn't seem like Steve Wilks is walking into a fair opportunity to really get to show what he can do, especially with the Super Bowl champs on the board next, and then the Super Bowl champs before that and the Tampa Bay Bucks the next game. Going into there with P.J. Walker, it seems like you're going into a gunfight with a knife. Regardless, I think this is an opportunity that Steve Wilks probably wouldn't have got anywhere else just because of that lawsuit. So I guess you kind of just got to count the blessings for Steve Wilks. I'll be rooting for him. You know something that I just found odd that hit me, that I have a weird conspiracy theory. I'm going to put my tinfoil hat on. It's kind of weird that some coaches would join a presumed lame duck coach. It's probably why it was hard for Matt Rhule to find Ben McAdoo or offensive coordinator in general to lead this team, because people don't want to be put in a position to set up for failure. One of the reasons Ben McAdoo probably came along is because he's trying to get a head coaching gig. He hasn't really been any significant spot on the staff since those days in with the Giants in 2014, 2015. Now, Steve Wilks joined as a former head coach coming back to Charlotte. It's kind of weird. There's no affiliation with Matt Rhule, but he does have an affiliation with Charlotte. My conspiracy is he joined a lame duck coach because he knew it was a lame duck coach. He had to kind of get a backdoor way into getting a head coaching opportunity. He probably assumed that an aggressive or kind of sporadic owner like David Tepper may pull the trigger on firing Matt Rhule a little bit early. And the only guys with head coaching experience on the staff really is Steve Wilks and Ben McAdoo. And we know probably Ben McAdoo's not going to be that guy because he's just now getting his legs. And Steve Wilks is the most recent coach to have a head coaching title. So Steve Wilks saw the vision. He saw that Matt Rhule was probably going to be out of there early. He wanted to get his hands inside the defense. There was some clashing and stuff between him and Phil Snow anyway. He was a logical guy to become the interim coach because he's so familiar with the Panthers and Charlotte. It makes sense. Smooth move by Steve Wilks. Salute to him. I know people don't want to prepare for the tank, but I do want to see Steve Wilks do well. I want to win for these players. They put their heart and soul in this. Yeah, they get paid a lot of money, but I root for them. My voice is a little hoarse because I was at the game cheering for them. I love these guys and I love this team. I love some of these players that put their life and their body on the line just for our pure entertainment. I appreciate everything they do. So I want to see them get a little bit of return on their time and efforts of investment. But nevertheless, Steve Wilks seems to be a guy that a lot of people like. A lot of former players on Instagram were talking about how they were rooting for him and Al Holcomb. Al Holcomb will be promoted to defensive coordinator. Al Holcomb has been around since 2013 with the Panthers. He left for a little bit, was the defensive coordinator with Steve Wilks in Arizona. That didn't have a great year, but they only had 1 year. You don't really get a chance to put the type of players that you want after 1 year. So holding him accountable for his defense being towards the bottom of the barrel when he was in Arizona doesn't seem that fair to me. So I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt based off of what he was able to do in Carolina as a defensive coordinator when he was here with Ron Rivera. Nevertheless, Al Holcomb seems to be a favorite. He was around coaching linebackers back in the day when Luke Kuechly, one of the greats, were here. And apparently from what we're here, he's one of the main reasons that Luke Kuechly actually hangs around because they have that connection. So seeing these guys finally get their chances and being able to probably get a good amount of time with 12 more games left on the schedule, I'm happy for them to get this opportunity. Hopefully something happens. We'll see what happens in regards to him getting a fair shake and consideration for being the future head coach. But it's not a death sentence that this team has put an interim coach. We saw the Raiders last year get rid of Gruden and end up going to the playoffs. But obviously that wasn't enough to get him the head coaching job because Josh McDaniels became the guy. So there's still a lot of football to be played, and there's still a lot of opportunity ahead of this team. I know it's not just the coach that's coaching for their careers and lives. It's the players as well, because whoever the new coach is will not have any kind of inkling or relationship to any of these players. So anybody's job can be on the line when you change the guard of the lead man in charge. So that'll be something to pay attention to. But in regards to this as well, we have to talk about David Tepper having a press conference. We don't really hear from him that often, but he had a 25-minute presser today. There was a lot that was said, but the one thing that stuck out to me, I wanted to see some accountability from him. He did have a comment about sometimes trying to be that one guy that thinks outside the box, that doesn't do things the regular way and doesn't want to conform, isn't always the right approach. He talked about not conforming and giving Matt Rhule that 7-year deal for all that money, trying to find a guy that was a program builder. Probably wasn't the right way to go. He said he sat down with dinner with some of his fellow owners and they kind of broke it down to him and told him how things can go sometimes. And it seems like he's learned a little bit, but there's still a mixed bag because he also made comments about what the things that he's done around Charlotte and talked about things that really had nothing to do with football, talked about the MLS team, talked about the economy being better, talking about concerts and shows at Bank of America, all things that many Panthers fans do not care about. I know natives of Charlotte probably feel okay about it, but for him to feel like he was taking a lot of credit for a lot of the activity that's going on in Charlotte was a little bit weird. Nevertheless, I like to hear the fact that he's admitted that trying to do things outside the box isn't always the way to go, especially in the NFL when there's tried and true methods of doing things. You don't have to invent the wheel every time. It's a copycat league. Don't try to do anything. I understand you want to take big calculated risk, which is what he said he wanted to do, but it ain't always it, Chief. So shout out to him for actually trying to learn his lesson there. But the other nugget that I wanted to talk about is about the GM Scott Fitterer. David Tepper was asked this question about the future of Scott Fitterer on this team. Let's play the clip.
Two questions. One, is your plan currently to move forward with Scott as GM into 2023? And two, do you think there's something advantageous about having a GM and a head coach both come in at the same time together?
It's a little premature to ask those questions. Scott is our GM. There's no thought of mine right now. Right now, my focus is Wilks and helping him have success in the new role.
As you can see, he didn't say that Scott was going to be fired, but he was pretty non-committal. Now, in my opinion, if you're going to get rid of your GM and you want to get a head start on finding a coach, you probably need to get rid of your GM now. But how much does removing Scott Fitterer from there and anybody else affiliated in-house with the front office really affect everything, how stuff runs to a day-to-day? Because we see the big turnover of presidents and team representatives under David Tepper that works for Tepper Sports and Entertainment, and it's just a weird thing. So getting rid of a guy like Scott can make this house of cards just tumble. But if you're going to get a new GM, do it now. That way they can find both of those guys and they can work together on getting the head coach. The mistake he made before, which is firing Ron Rivera and not getting rid of Marty Herney, but then bringing Matt Rhule and then helping Matt Rhule choose the GM, that's backwards. And that goes back to the thing we talked about, not conforming. He needs to make sure that he either keeps Scott, who I think deserves another opportunity. Most GMs get a chance to choose their own head coach, not vice versa. So at least give him that. Even if you put him on a short leash and a hot seat for the next year or two, at least give Fitterer that fair of a shake. Obviously, with him and Dan Morgan and some of these other guys, Samir Suleiman in the front office, I think we have some competent people. It's just we weren't getting the best out of the players on the field, which just has to do with the coaching. So pay attention to Scott Fitterer if he'll be around long term. Like I said, he was non-committal on Scott Fitterer being here in the future. He didn't want to really talk about it. If Scott was going to be here without a shadow of a doubt, I think he would have assured that. But it seems like Tepper is not taking anything off the board right now. Anybody can get it when it turns to getting this axe. So pay attention to Scott Fitterer sticking around. But injuries coming out this game yesterday. The 49ers had a lot of injuries. The Panthers, obviously, J.C. Horn left the game with the hurt hip as well. But the biggest injury is to Baker Mayfield, our starting quarterback. Now, good, bad, or indifferent, Baker Mayfield is our starter. And in my opinion, our best chance at being, dare I say, successful at this point. Obviously, P.J. Walker is a backup. He can get you a game or two in a spot. But Baker Mayfield has a high ankle sprain. He walked away from the game in a boot yesterday, and the MRI came back negative, but they diagnosed it with the high ankle sprain, and he'll be out for some weeks. Now, if you heard this story before, Sam Darnold had a high ankle sprain. But another quarterback on our roster, Matt Corral, didn't have an ankle sprain, but he did have the Liz Frank injury in the foot. So that's 3 quarterbacks on this team that have had lower extremity injuries, which is tough, man, because it's just tough. It just seems like a coincidence, but it's just bad luck. Nevertheless, P.J. Walker will be the guy for now. As we go to play the Rams in L.A., the defending Super Bowl champs, P.J. Walker will be the guy. But some guy is coming out the IR within the next, 14 days. Sam Darnold, he had that high ankle sprain. He's probably about a week or two away from being back on the active roster and being able to practice again by rule. Because the IR rule is after the 4 weeks that you're on injured reserve, you have 21 days to be added back to the active roster, or else you'll be out for the season. So if they want to bring Sam back at any point, they'll probably have to activate him either this week or sometime next week. Otherwise, Sam Darnold's season is done. And I expect them to do that soon and very soon. We'll see. I think maybe a game or two will probably be PJ. He'll probably go against the Rams in Tampa, and we'll see what happens in Atlanta. I think Sam Darnold is probably starting quarterback by Halloween, just by my hunch and my feeling in doing the math. But nevertheless, Baker Mayfield is out for a high ankle sprain. Will it be 4 to 6 weeks? Will it be 6 to 8, more like Sam's was? Who knows? But we will pay attention to that. But for now, PJ Walker is the guy. And last but not least, this is not really news, but just some discussion that I've seen on Twitter. A lot of people are debating if the Panthers should be rebuilding completely or retooling. Now, we had this controversy because people feel like we never did a true rebuild. They kept preaching rebuild when they brought in Matt Rhule, but they never did the right thing. I kind of agree. They wanted to win when they saw how competitive we were, but they also tried to win now. That's why they made moves by getting Sam Darnold or getting rid of Teddy Bridgewater too soon. But with now that we're in this position, people don't really know. And now the rumors are going to fly. We talked about Christian McCaffrey trade rumors flying around. More came around today about them talking to the Bills. It also came out that it wasn't true. Other people are talking about Robbie Anderson or DJ Moore to the Bears or to the Packers or to teams like that seem to be wide receiver away from being a little bit more competitive. You're going to continue to hear these type of rumors, but in my opinion, the Panthers just need to get a competent offensive-minded coach, the quarterback that they want of the future, and add a couple pieces on defense, maybe on the D-line or so like that, and maybe upgrade where you can. But they've been competitive enough in these games for me to feel like a competent coach can get this team to at least be competitive. And with Tom Brady probably being his last year as a pro, why would you completely break this down when you suffered through all these years of putting together some young talent and a young core that you do now? And the NFC South is going to be wide open next year. Clearly, you beat the Saints this year. They're not in a great spot because their coach is kind of underachieving in Dennis Allen. The Falcons, Arthur Smith is doing some good things. They have the Falcons pretty competitive, but they haven't even ushered in their quarterback of the future yet. They're still adding some pieces. They can't figure out how to get Kyle Pitts the ball. They're still making some moves. They're competitive, but it is what it is. I feel like once Tom Brady retires, the Bucs are going to have to rebuild themselves. They're going to have to start over. They have some young talent on defense, but I think they've been going all in so much trying to get these Super Bowl rings with Tom Brady. They're going to have to take a step back and take a breather and rebuild the roster. The NFC South is going to be right for the picking. There's no reason, in my opinion, to completely tear down your system and trade away young talent just to say that, hey, we want to do a rebuild. When winning the NFC South is the easiest way to get to a playoffs, and getting in the playoffs is the easiest way to win a Super Bowl. The NFC South is going to be wide open. Why not stick to it? You guys let me know down below in the comments, how do you feel about us doing a total rebuild or a total retool? And actually, let me know how you feel about any of the things we discussed today in the video. But without further ado, make sure you are subscribed. I'm Aaron Duncan here with the Necessary Button Sports Talk. See you next time. Peace.